Welcome back and thanks so much for staying with ANN7 Prime. My name is Cindy Mabi. The Cape Town Refugee Reception Office is set to reopen, and this after the Supreme Court of Appeal's decision to force the Department of Home Affairs to reopen the facility. Home Affairs outlined the progress and it's adhering to the court's decision. They also explained why the reception centre was closed in the first place. The Supreme Court of Appeal's deadline to reopen the facility lapsed the last month, and the department says it awaited the Constitutional Court appeal to decide on whether to reopen the office or not.
The CPD area in a building, so which is not conducive for the refugee center. Hence now Public Works must find the accommodation. Once they have it, we'll go and operate. So there's nothing as a department which we are delaying, because we are ready. We've got people who are working there. As I said that now in the budget, we already allocated for that. If we get a building by tomorrow, we'll operate. The problem which we have around the Western Cape was this issue of zoning which I'm talking about. It was the people in the area which we were in who raised the issue and said the operation of this refugee center is causing a nuisance factor into our business. And then now they chucked us out. We went to the court. We lost that first one and said, no, close it. It was not our decision. It was the decision of the court. And then now we're operating where we are. And then, as we said, that the first court ruling says, no, it's fine, not open. And then thereafter they said we must open, but we're complying with what we have. We want to open refugee centers even next to the borders, so that people don't sojourn within the country down to our Western Cape, whereas they're coming close to the borders. So we've already got the land next to Libombo, where we're going to be building another refugee reception processing center.
And joining us in studio is Prince Abenge, African Diaspora Forum, a Secretary General. Bobo Mfubu is attorney at the Refugee Rights Unit at the University of Cape Town, joining us via Skype. Patrick Matenga, Director at UNIFAM. And we have Mr. Mkoseli Ableni, Director General at the Department of Home Affairs on the phone line. We'll start with you, Mr. Ableni, and good evening to all our guests. Thank you so much for your time. Mr. Abenge here from the African Diaspora Forum, not necessarily agreeing with the clip that we played, saying that you'll accommodate refugees. His sense is that generally there has been a disregard in the basic human right of how refugees have been treated in the country. Your view?
Good evening to your guests and as well as the viewers at home. Well, I can say, based on the statistics which we have, is that in South Africa we at one point were even having a high number of asylum seekers in our country. And then based on that, we have to comply, because South Africa is a signatory to the UN protocols, which specifies clearly how refugees and asylum seekers must be treated. And that's what as South Africa we are following. And then there are a lot of people who come to our country, and those who comply with that criteria are able to be given a protection in the country. But the issue which we have as South Africa government is that we are faced with the issue of mixed migration. What we mean by that is that there are people who come to our country seeking for economic opportunities, but what they declare themselves as is that I am an asylum seeker, because in terms of the protocol I'm talking about, you must be running out of your country for persecution, whether it is religious or is of sexual orientation or there is war and all that. Then that criteria, that's what you need to meet. So when now we have accessed the applications, we always manage only about 6% of those people who have applied who qualify to be the refugees. And then the majority, they do not meet that criteria.
Okay, and that would obviously lead into illegal immigration where people out of desperation and, as you were saying, for economic opportunities will try one way or another to enter the country. How well has Home Affairs, including the other stakeholder ministries around the borders, been able to manage the issue of illegal migration?
Yes. Yeah. No, the issue of illegal immigration is still a matter which we are really faced with. But what we are doing, as I'm saying, that we are having now these refugee reception offices, which now we are trying to deal. But now if you look at the numbers have reduced drastically because of the processes which we put in place, that now we're able to deal with these claims better than other years, which were having a lot of backlog. But now we are able now to deal with the applications quicker than before. But in a policy perspective, what we are looking at, we'll recall that as a Department of Home Affairs, we published a white paper on international migration. And in that white paper, we are trying to deal specifically with the people who are on the lower skills level, want to come to our country, because the current Immigration Act does support the people of the highest echelon of the skills. But on the lower side, we do not have anything. Hence, people are going to the side of asylum seeker. But now, in that, the proposals even go to extent of getting what we want to propose as a SADC skills visa for people who are at a lower echelon, who can be able to get the jobs legally in the farming industry, in the petrol stations, or all that. Then we have a quota to be able to deal with that. All that is aiming at able to deal with this issue of mixed migration.
All right, and Mr. Pleni, were there no other options available at the time before the litigation, to contest the eviction from the previous Cape Town Refugee Reception Centre that has essentially left many asylum seekers or refugees stranded? Is that the only other recourse that you had at the time in retrospect?
Yes. No, that was you remember now that the issue of Cape Town, if you have a history of it, is that we were operating a refugee reception center in Cape Town in a particular area. However, the neighbors which we had around that area complained of the nuisance factor which was caused by the type of a business which were running there. Then they approached the courts and then forced us to close that refugee center on the basis that it causes the nuisance factor there. So that was the reason which has come out of that. However, whilst we're dealing with that matter, we were able to say, but the people who are already the existing clients, those ones will be dealt with within the refugee center in Cape Town. But the new applicants, as they come into the country, will direct them to where we are having the refugee reception offices.
And the rationale behind having reception centres for refugees at border posts, and I'll get a response from the African diaspora on their feeling around that. What is the rationale or the motive behind that?
Yes, the rationale is to bring the services close to the people where they come in. Because if now these refugees, and in fact we are even going to be changing even the concept, we are calling it will be now a refugee processing center. What we want to do now is starting at Libombo. We want the building which we'll build, they must be able to accommodate other stakeholders like your human rights. They must have an office within the center. The Red Cross must have an office within the center. The Department of Social Development must have an office within the center. The Legal Aid must have an office within the center. And Home Affairs must have an office there. And as well as our SCRA, which is these bodies which looks after the SCRA and the RAP. Because once you have everyone under one roof, then those things are going to help us to fast-track the processes of the refugees and asylum seekers. The other advantage which we're going to be having, because the same center will also have an accommodation, but not for everyone, so that the people who are coming from the low-risk areas were able to say, no, let's accommodate that person whilst we are dealing with the claim, because we can deal with it quickly. Let me make an example. Take the countries in the SADC region. So we know that it does not mean that there can be no asylum seekers in the SADC region, but in general, SADC region is peaceful. So if now those people are coming and say, I'm from Swaziland, I make an example, I'm not saying there can be no asylum seekers. Then I have now to say, we know what is happening in Swaziland, and then that person is able to be dealt with within 5 days and say, do you have a claim really that you are an asylum seeker or you are an economic migrant? If the decision is you are not an asylum seeker, therefore we're able to take that person, deport it back quickly within the border, rather than when people are already in the country, the money which we spend on the deportation of illegal immigration is enormous.
DG, please stay on the line. Just a response from the African Diaspora Forum Secretary General Prince Benge. It seems that all boxes have been ticked in accommodating legitimate asylum seekers and refugees in the country, and that due to a court process there had been a delay in the Cape Town Reception Centre, but there are now plans abound to ensure that there is at least dignity in the processing of refugees.
First of all, I'm not very comfortable to use the word illegal, the word the Director General has been using. In international law, they don't use that word. They use irregular immigrant. And there are irregularity in immigration. So let's come back to what the Director said, that there was a complaint by the neighbors. That's the main reason why they closed the refugee reception office. And is that the valid reason to take it from Cape Town to the border? I don't think so. And he said it is in the way to bring the service closer to people. I don't think so. There are people who got their asylum seeker permit in Cape Town. So they have to travel the whole way to renew their paper to Musina if they decided to keep only that office at the border. So you see how much they spend. Some of them, they are mothers. They have to travel with the kids, and they have to find an accommodation until their permit of 6 months is renewed. So it's a hardship for refugees.
All right, let's get clarity, DJ, in the sense that the Cape Town Centre will be reopened. If you can give us an indication as to when that will happen. Secondly, and what is the appropriate terminology in dealing with irregular or illegal migration? Mr. Abeng is taking...
that is semantics, so I don't want to get into that, whether it's illegal or irregular. The fact of the matter, what we're talking about is somebody who does not have proper documents to be in the country. Then, let's come now, but I'm happy that he's saying now, if the refugee center is only in the Musina, then people have to travel. Do you know that we've got a system where people are able to renew their permits in a system? Because we're talking about automation. Home Affairs is trying to automate its processes. If you go to the Desmond Tutu Refugee Reception Center, what have we done there? We've got a machine which is outside, it's not even inside, where if you come to renew your permit, you just go there and you do it. And those machines, we wanted even to install it in the Cape Town Refugee Center, because we are saying, if I'm coming to renew this, because this is just a time frame, it says my permit was 6 months. It comes to the 6 months, my appeal is not yet come back. Why do you want to go to a refugee center and meet with a person for something like that? Instead of now you put your fingerprint and automatically you get your renewal. So it does not mean that when we close the services will only be received in those refugee centers. Another one, we are already introduced that. We publish what will be a smart card for a refugee and what will be the passport for a refugee. Then we are saying, once you are declared as a refugee, you are having all the rights as a South African except the right to vote. Why can't you go and apply for your smart card and for your passport in the same office, which is in Cape Town? So those refugees will be able now to apply for those services throughout the country. Home Affairs has got 411 offices throughout the country. The refugees will be able to go and apply from there. So people mustn't think that when we do, they must go physically into the office with them. Our offices are more for the people who are coming for the first time.
All right, DG, please stay on the line, and thanks for that clarity. We have Bobo Mfubu, attorney at the Refugee Rights Unit at the University of Cape Town. Just your response, if you were privy to the discussion with the Director General of Home Affairs, Mr. Apleni, explaining that all the stops have been pulled to ensure that refugees are accommodated, albeit with the glitch now with the Cape Town Refugee Reception Centre. Your response to his remarks?
I think in order to distill the issues, if I'm going to be frank, I don't believe that the Director General is necessarily canvassing the issues in a truthful or factual manner. If I can just briefly put you through, run you through the history of the Cape Town Refugee Office, the eviction that the DG is referring to way predates the decision in 2012 to close that office. So there were issues around keeping the Cape Town Refugee Office open in certain locations within Cape Town. There were issues around the other business owners in the area not wanting the Cape Town Refugee Office to be there. But however, when the Cape Town Refugee Office moved to where it's currently located at the Foreshore office, there has been no issue with neighbors or having them evicted from that property. They have been operating at that property way before 2012. So the decision to close the Cape Town office, according to the Director General in 2012 in papers that they had served, they had made public, the reason that they had cited was that they don't need an office in the Cape Town in Cape Town. And that decision has been challenged both at the Western Cape High Court and at the Supreme Court of Appeal twice. And the Supreme Court of Appeal had indicated that the decision to close the Cape Town Refugee Office is substantively irrational and unlawful. So they were given until the 31st of March to open, and they haven't opened. Their response is that building.
Yes, no, go ahead. There's a bit of a delay there. Sorry, just carry on. Carry on with your train of thought.
And then what has not been explained is why suddenly they require a new building. Because prior to the decision to close that office, that building was servicing newcomers, new applicants for asylum, and it was also assisting applicants who had applied at different offices but were now residing in Cape Town. There's been no explanation as to why suddenly they need a new building. Furthermore, part of the ruling at the Supreme Court of Appeal was that every month until the 31st of March, the Department of Home Affairs is required to file an affidavit to court to explain what measures they've taken in order to open that office. They've not filed any of those affidavits. And this decision to reopen the office by the Supreme Court of Appeal has not been sprung upon them. It was made last year in September. They tried to appeal at the Constitutional Court, and the Constitutional Court did not hear their appeal because they said they didn't have any reasonable prospects of success. So they've known since last year in December that they need to comply with the court order. Only now at the final hour they're saying they want a building from Public Works. And we've been informed by Public Works that they were only given a request by Home Affairs to look for a building in February. So they've delayed out of their own in order not to open that office. And the detriment that is suffered by many new applicants who want to apply, who live in Cape Town and want to apply, is that they now remain undocumented and they can't apply. There is also no interim or transitional plan by the Department of Home Affairs to ensure that while they look for a building, if that is genuinely the excuse, while they look for a building, what are they going to do in order to comply with the court order? Because it's a similar court order in relation to the Port Elizabeth office, which was also closed. The Supreme Court of Appeal there as well said that office must remain open and must be a fully functional refugee reception office. That office is still not a fully functional refugee reception office. And the Supreme Court of Appeal in that case as well lamented and said it appears to be the behavior of the Department of Home Affairs not to comply with court orders, which we believe is very, very dangerous in a democratic society.
Mr. Mfubu, let's get a response from DG. Your response in the sense that this is a self-inflicted crisis, so to speak, that you could have complied with court orders.
No, thanks very much. Let me start with the PE matter. You know, since there is a principle in the South African court process, which is called the contempt of court. You know what contempt of court means? Is that when you don't comply with the court decision, the party will go to court, and if you have been found that you have been dragging your feet, the court will issue what we call the contempt of court. The Speaker is correct. What we were doing, even in the PE matter, because when our papers were discussed at court, we made it clear that Home Affairs, in terms of a government process, I don't have a mandate to get a office accommodation. It is the matter of Public Works. And Public Works must follow as well a procurement process in terms of Section 217 of the Constitution.
Yes, but DG, this application was only done in February. So why the delay, in the sense that if it's a matter that predates the Supreme Court of Appeal outcome and the closure of the building?
Let me explain. It can't predate, because when you appeal, the gentleman knows, once you appeal a court decision, the effect of that, it suspends the decision of that court until the court of the higher court is made. So you can't say, when I've got to appeal, when the decision was taken at that time. And also in Cape Town, he knows, the Western Cape High Court ruled in our favor. The High Court in Western Cape ruled in our favor and say, the facts and all the points which were put into the court, if we use the same words, were rational at that point. Then the other side appealed. When they appealed, that meant that it suspended that particular decision. And then we appealed the matter. The Constitutional Court.
All right, Mr. Kaplan, I beg your pardon. In the interest of time, can you give us timelines in terms of Public Works?
The timeline is simple. Once Public Works is managed to procure a building, and that building is given to us, we will open the refugee center. But if I don't have a building from Public Works, that's what I've submitted to the court. I've submitted, I heard the gentleman said I did not. I submitted now a response to the court and say, I have requested Public Works. Public Works has confirmed that I've received the request from Home Affairs. I am waiting for them. If today they come to us and say, here is the building, then we'll operate.
All right, Mkhoseli Apleni, Director General at the Department of Home Affairs and attorney with the Human Rights or Refugees Rights Unit at the University of Cape Town, Bobo Mfubu. Are you satisfied? And how do you then hold to account that Public Works are also, expedite this process of allocating or getting a building for the refugee center? Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm just saying, are you satisfied with the response from the DG of Home Affairs that it is now in the hands of Public Works, and once that process is concluded, the center will be opened again in Cape Town? Hi, Popo. I think we've lost. Yeah, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, much better. Go ahead.
The response by the Director General is simply, for me, to be frank, not good enough. You are given an order in December, and the order says your office must reopen by the 31st of March. If we simply accept the explanation by the DG, it means that then, in essence, he's saying the office will open whenever it opens. Because you can't simply shirk the responsibility and say it's up to Public Works. Because you had taken a decision to close that Cape Town office twice already, and you had lost in both the Western Cape High Court and the Supreme Court of Appeal. Their last-ditch attempt was in September last year, when they tried to appeal this decision at the Supreme Court of Appeal. So they should have known that there was a very strong possibility that they were going to lose that case, as they had done many times before. And then already they should have.
All right, Popo Mfubu,
if they do lose, they comply with the order of the Supreme Court of Appeal. So it's not good enough to say, we've asked Public Works, but we only asked them in February. That's the reason why we can't comply. That's not good enough. It sends a very negative message and a very bad message to the rest of society when the government itself, which is an arm of government, does not comply with court orders. The courts are meant to be respected. The rule of law is meant to be respected, and it's not enough. It's just not good enough not to even have a transitional plan to ensure that in the interim you comply with the court order while you look for a new building.
All right, that's a Popo Mfobo, attorney at the Refugee Rights Unit at the University of Cape Town, joining us via Skype. We do apologize for the delay in the audio there. And Mr. Abenge, what happens now with those that are in the system or are unable to apply due to the offices not being reopened?
The danger is people will be forced into irregularities, because you heard at the very beginning the Director General said, if we find a building tomorrow, we can open tomorrow. And it also means if they don't find it tomorrow, if they will find it within 6 months. So people will be stranded, and the time for them to renew their papers, their permit, will expire, and they will be forced into irregularities. So it's a worry. It's a big worry. There is no urgency.
But there are mechanisms. They explain that you can go to any Home Affairs office.
It's very theoretical. If you go tomorrow to Marabat Start at the Desmond Tutu Refugee Center, you will see how it's working there, and you won't like it. That's very theoretical. We go there. We see what's happening there. It's an imbroglio situation. It's a difficult situation for refugees. So theoretically, it sounds very good that there is a system where people can attend to themselves, they can do this and that. That's not practical. When you go on the ground and you see what's happening there.
Yeah, but do you accept that by virtue of being in the country and applying for asylum, that it is not a guarantee that there are compliance and requirements as any other sovereign country would have?
Yeah, but you say now only 6% are genuine asylum seekers. Can you tell me the research and the criteria that were taken into account so that the Home Affairs can come up with the 6%? There are people who are coming from a country in war, for example, who are rejected. In 2012, many people with refugee status were stripped of the refugee status. They say, no, it's not eternal. You cannot be a refugee if we deem that your country, this and that. But there is no proper research that has been done to say, no, only 6% of asylum seekers are genuine asylum seekers.
Yeah, well, keep us posted, Mr. Abenge, and I imagine that you will mobilize and try and intervene for those especially that are outside the process of application. But we do thank you for your time, as always. So we're joined by Prince Abenge from the African Diaspora Forum as the Secretary General in studio. Thanks so much for watching. We'll be back with the latest news update and BizPulse just after this.